This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome everybody to today's webinar. This is brought to you by the ITE ANZ section, and the topic is Road Safety Star Ratings, Application of AUSRAP. My name is David Nash. I'll be the moderator of the session, and we have 4 interesting speakers today on this particular topic. Firstly, I'd like to do a welcome to country. We acknowledge the Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first inhabitants of the nation and the traditional custodians of the lands where we live, learn and work. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. We acknowledge and respect the Treaty of Waitangi and Maori as the original people of Aotearoa and New Zealand. So thank you for that. I'd also like to acknowledge the sponsors of the ITE. AusTraffic is our platinum sponsor, and we have sponsors of Traffic Works, who sponsors the Student Award. Sidra Solutions sponsors the President's Dinner and Postgraduate Award, RACV the annual breakfast, and we have 3 corporate supporters, O'Brien Traffic, Arup and Movement and Place Consulting. And without their assistance, these sorts of free webinars wouldn't really be free. A few housekeeping things. Please remain on mute. I think there's maybe a couple of people who are not on mute at the moment, so if you could just mute yourselves, that would be appreciated, unless you're actually a speaker. We will have the presentations first and leave questions and towards the end. And if you've got any questions, put them in through the chat function, which is the little thought bubble icon on your controls. So just put any of your questions in there as we go along, but you may want to wait until you see whether they answer your questions before you ask them. Okay, so the topic today is Road Safety Star Ratings. This is a follow-on from a similar webinar that was held 2 days ago by Austroads called Directions for AUSRAP. And I just had a look on their website and I couldn't actually see a recording of it, but maybe that's coming up soon on their website. If you go to the Austroads website and look at webinars and events and look at past webinars, hopefully that will come up soon. If anyone has any more information about the recording for the session 2 days ago, please put some information into the chat. So we have 4 good speakers today. Gabby O'Neill, Mark Ellis from the Federal Office of Road Safety, Joseph Lee, who is from Transport for New South Wales, and Ken Beer, who is the Principal of Safe Systems Solutions. So they're our 4 speakers, and without any further ado, go to the first presentation. So Gabby and Mark are going to present doing a vaudeville act according to Mark. So we'll see who's the better singer, hey? So I'll introduce both of them at the start, and while I'm doing this, we can transfer to their slides if you like, Ken. So Gabby O'Neill has been the head of the Federal Office of Road Safety since 2019. The office is responsible for setting the direction of road safety through the National Road Safety Strategy, administering funds to develop innovative road safety practices, and embedding safe systems thinking into infrastructure investment. Mark Ellis also works at the Federal Office of Road Safety and is the Director of Road Safety Strategy Implementation and Programs. He joined the office in 2020 and he's responsible for managing a portfolio of road safety grants and infrastructure programs worth over $3 billion. Wouldn't we all like to have a good slice of that? So if we can now hand over to Gabby to do her presentation. Hello, Gabby, are you there?
I'm hoping you can hear me now.
Yep.
Yep, okay. I'll repeat my words that I just said. Today I'm speaking from Kaurna country, which crosses the Adelaide Plains, and I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of Kaurna country and pay my respects to past, present and emerging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, and I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders today. If we go to the next slide, Ken, I just want to briefly touch on the National Road Safety Strategy. The topic of discussion today is star ratings, risk ratings, however you might want to sort of acknowledge it. But we are really interested in stemming the tide of fatal and serious injury across the nation. To do that, we know that we need whole of system improvements. And so we're looking at, in a sort of a first step, to lift to a minimum 3-star rating. However it is sort of characterised within state and territory databases, we want to lift away from very high risk to moderate risk on all national highways and high-speed, high-volume regional roads to make sure that we've got at least a minimum 3-star by 2025. But in the long term, Vision Zero by 2050, we want to aim much higher for a 4- and 5-star, 5-star where possible, of course, on all high-volume roads. I'm not sure everyone's on mute. I'm getting a bit of background interference there. So the National Road Safety Strategy, whilst it's supported by all ministers, it's still not public. And that's because we're still actively working on the action plan and hoping to get that to ministers shortly to get approval for those to be published. But as I say, star ratings are key and going to play a key role in how we tackle road safety and reducing fatal and serious injuries across the decade. Next slide, please, Ken. As part of trying to establish baselines and understand where we are at now, the Commonwealth has stood up the National Road Safety Data Hub. And as part of that, you can see that data is key. It's a key feature to help us actually understand where we're at and to understand the gaps and the measures and the investment that we need in order to get to where we want to go. So what I've got here is just a few examples of some of the pages. We've got the National Crash Dashboard. We've got the learner plates. Even though we're national, we've got a variety of rules and regulations split up state by state so people can see the variety. And that first map that you can see in the background there is we're trying to actually plot all of the programs and the projects from the road safety program. Next slide, please, Ken. So now I'm going to start throwing questions to Mark, given he's head of the road safety program. And Mark, first and foremost, perhaps you might like to actually tell us what's the basis of standing up the road safety program?
So, Gabby, as you mentioned, we're implementing the new strategy and action plan, and with that, we've got a large legacy network that has become or is ill-equipped to meet all the expectations that we have of road safety going forward. The goal of the program is to retrofit really the highest risk regional corridors with low cost, easy to implement safety interventions, and also in urban areas to look at providing greater protection for vulnerable road users in those spaces. So things like shared paths, separated bike paths, etc. We've got an aim in the program, as you mentioned, is to lift all the roads to a minimum of a 3-star safety rating, and we'll talk a little bit on the later on how we look at that safety rating and assess it from what we get from the states. The other important part of the program is making sure that we get a good geographic spread of the works so that they actually are spread across the entire country and also in regional and urban areas. This slide is showing our works from Tranche 1, which is sitting at around just under 700 project locations. And that doesn't include a number of separate sub-programs of mass action treatments. But now that we're going through Tranche 2, we're sitting at well over 1,000 projects at the moment that we're managing through that tranche. And the vast majority of that is actually in the non-urban areas. One thing I probably should mention as I was talking about tranches is the way the program is as well is it's the $3 billion spread over 5-6 month tranches. So basically works have to be proposed and be delivered within those that 6 months of the tranche. We have a funding model which is called the use it or lose it model, which is if the works can't be delivered in that time and there's not a reason outside of the control of the state in delivering it, that then that money that wasn't spent inside that tranche is taken off the next tranche's allocation and is spread around to the states which can deliver.
And what's the purpose of that, Mark? That seems like a pretty harsh measure.
Yeah, so the purpose of that is it's probably twofold. One is to ensure delivery, to ensure that the projects that are being put up are ones that can be delivered within the tranche, and also noting the projects that were always envisaged to be delivered through the program are those low cost, easy to deliver, and projects which require or would require very little design work and also approval processes. So the sort of things that we're talking about is if we're looking at corridor treatments, is we're talking about applications of shoulder sealing, applications of audible tactile line marking, applications of barriers, wide centre lines, and then, as I said, in those urban areas, it's things like pedestrian crossings, perhaps new traffic lights going in, lots of the sort of projects which have probably sat in some of the states' forward work plans for a long time, but because of the BCRs perhaps have not ever risen perhaps to the top of the heap. We don't have a BCR process in this project. It's actually about safety outcomes and what will deliver safety outcomes.
So this is a bit more of what's in the bottom drawer, what's your wish list?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and I suppose the 6 months means that there's a sense of urgency that's probably created from the COVID pandemic, the urgency to ensure people are staying in work, but also an urgency to get the treatments laid.
Yes, so this did come out of a stimulus package for COVID. So, and that also I think lends itself to, in some ways, the sort of works that we're talking about, which where construction companies can bring on some of the more lower skilled workers and provide some training to them in some of the roadworks going on, which also leads into that geographic spread of it as well, to ensure that the funding for this from the federal government is spread around the country in a fair geographic basis.
Okay. Ken, do you mind moving to the next slide? Here, I feel like what we've got is a vast array of star ratings, and as a non-engineer, this is star ratings are very engineering based, but I do feel like they tell a story, and to a non-engineer, they can sort of quickly explain sort of a risk level and the change in the risk level. Mark, what you've got here is sort of a bit of an array. Do you want to explain why you've got these multiple types of displays here? Yeah,
so Gabby, we're not wedded to how the pre and post risk rating is provided to us as part of the project assessment and the submission from the states and territories. So we, and I've got a bit of, as I said, there is a mix here. So For example, I provided, there's a bit of an example there from one state which has provided us a pre and post NRAM assessment of their work. Another state who has provided us what they see as the current 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, etc. of by kilometres across the corridor that they're working on, and then what the post expectation will be there. We can get that data we allow the states to really provide that data in the way that they've already got it. So if a state has done a full OSRAP assessment previously and has the star ratings on those roads, they can provide it from that actual OSRAP assessment. If they use NRAM and they've done the NRAM assessment, adding that extra bit of the crash risk in there as well, we can have that. But also, the top table is taken from the Austroads guide on network safety plans and using the stereotype model. So we allow the states, if they haven't done that work, to also just use that stereotype model, which provides quite a quick and less complex assessment of what the roads are that they're looking at. Pardon, sorry?
Quick and dirty.
Yes, I was going to say yes, quick and dirty assessment of what the road risk is on those, and converts it into a star rating. And the thing also that then allows us to do, and if we use, and we often use the Austroads guide as well, just to look at what has been provided to us as the before rating, look at the work that's being proposed, and then look at what has been that we're being told will be the after, just to do our cross-check on it as well. So if we look at that, and it may be a bit hard to see on the screen, this table, but it's one of the tables at the back of that Austroads guide. You can see how the risk rating, the star rating, actually, the star rating number goes up as certain interventions are applied to the work. So if you put in the sealed shoulders, the risk rating, the star rating increases for that road. If you add in wide centre line, etc., the star rating goes up as well.
So maybe when the slides are shared afterwards, people can expand this on their screen just to see the types of examples used, and you sort of get that change in rate of star ratings. And, you know, we've said star ratings by whatever means. Why is that important?
Well, I think but really from the whatever means is to ensure that we actually can get the star ratings to begin with. So I think if we'd settled on one model and said everyone had to have NRAM and do a full NRAM assessment, or even a full OSRAP assessment, we'd end up probably in the situation where we're only looking at some of the larger state highway networks and the national highway networks. This also allows the councils, who we also have got ability to get the works done through their state, through their states, to look at doing their assessments as well. And what it will give us, what we're looking at the end of it as well, is to really understand what was the state of the road, where we're getting to with the roads and their risks that are out there. And then as we start collecting more and more data as well, and that's one other thing with the program, is that there is requirements to provide us actual crash data across the whole network, not just on where the works have been held, but actually also start seeing whether the modelling that we have on the star ratings actually starts reflecting what is occurring on those roads. And if the crashes, the actual crashes aren't necessarily reflecting the modelling, we can start to look at, well, what else is going on with that road? Is there an enforcement issue? Is there some other things that are happening there on that road that need to be looked at as well? The main thing, as I said, is for getting the information in whatever suits the states to give us, is to really not to lock out any state from being able to provide that information to us.
And then, of course, it's a huge amount of public money. It's a big public spend, and I think probably that value for money and is something effective in order to understand that and to make the case for future funding. We really have to have some evidence in front of us. So yeah, I think the star ratings or the outcomes of understanding the risk and the change of risk with the treatment is really the story that we can tell around the process we're undertaking, one, to get the treatments and save the lives, but then also understand, has it worked?
Yeah.
And so I think there'll be a large evaluation program over time to make sure that we are seeing results, and you really need a large part of the network mapped and understood of the change to check that that is the case, I think, in order to test the the savings risks that and all of the guidelines. This is probably a very good test to say, if you say you're going to reduce the risk by 20%, did it do that? Like, this is enough of a flush of funding and enough projects to really test the veracity of the claims made by the star ratings.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that it will give us, as we start collecting more and more data from the works that we've done as well, is being able to go back and have a look at what interventions probably did make the biggest difference. Because once again, lots of this at the moment is based on modelling, isn't it? But as we start capturing actual data, you start looking at, as I said, is the modelling correct? And is a certain intervention just as good as perhaps another one? And if there's a cost differential there, do you decide to go for one over another going forward as well, if it is saving lives?
Yeah. And I think probably to note, there's been a huge interest from the Parliament and the Joint Select Committee and the Senate around how this program is operating and about the types of savings and the best opportunities to reduce fatal and serious injury crashes.
Yeah.
Ken, if we can go to the next slide, please. And Mark, I love the shadow here in the after photo. So this is Western Australia, and I can tell that it's the same trees, and I see a bit of shoulder ceiling there. So this is part of the evidence or part of what we're expecting to see?
Yeah, so at the end of the program, at the end of each tranche, we expect a post-completion report to be provided from the states and territories for the works that they've done, basically to show us what that they have done what they said they would do. But the other thing too is, what we're asking in that is, when they put in their bids for the work, as I said, they provide us what their before assessment is of the crash risk. They then provide the after assessment. But again, that's before the work has been done. So we're also then asking for, okay, you've now got to the end of it, you've done this, now do another risk assessment as well on it, so that we can see whether you've actually met those star ratings, or in some cases have gone higher, or that maybe more works need to be done to actually increase it. And could there be an actual spot issue on the corridor as well? This one is a good example. Which shows, as Gabby said, is in WA. So on this stretch of road, they did 86 kilometres of shoulder sealing, and rumble strips are still to basically come. They were there previously, but they're not there yet in this photo, and the machine is on its way, will be on its way behind after this photo was taken, to apply the rumble strips. So they were able to do this work between January and June of this year. And along with a lot of other work. So this is only one of the a number of projects that WA delivered during tranche 1. And this lifted that road above the 3-star rating. It was sitting below 3-star prior. The exact number I can't remember off the top of my head, and unfortunately I didn't write it down in my notes. But this did take it definitely above the 3-star, particularly once those rumble strips are applied there. So I think it's a good example of the sort of works that we always envisaged with the program when we set the program up. And a number of the states are rolling out basically large mass action works like this, while others have works like this mixed in with some other works that they're also doing. We see some states on particularly roads with lots of more curves than what you'll see on these highways, perhaps in Western Australia, with barriers being put in as well, and some more wider centre lines too.
And there's thousands of kilometres, am I right? I think Tranche 1 for WA, how many thousands of kilometres, do you know off the top of your head?
Let me come back to that during the Q&A. I'll have a quick look. I don't want to give the wrong answer.
Yeah, I can't remember whether it's 3,000 or 6,000, but whichever one you pick, it's pretty amazing. And I think, you know, there are roads like this all across the country, and you can see the risk on the before. There's not much room for error. It's pretty difficult to correct and not land up on the other side of the road into one of those trees. So I think the benefit of shoulder sealing is well known, but just to see it like that is fantastic. Mark, is there anything else that you wanted to say? I'm just sort of conscious of time and don't want to speak too long given there's other speakers after us.
I don't think there is, Gabby. We're happy to take any questions on the program that anyone may have. I think the only bit I may just add, and I think I did mention it, but just want to make it clear, is that this funding is provided to the states and can only be provided to the states because it's provided under the National Land Transport Act, which only allows us to fund the states for these works. However, a number of the states do put out bids for the local councils to bid for the work. And there's no preclusion from councils being able to get the funding, but it just has to go through the state system. It can't come directly from the Commonwealth. And
thanks.
I've just checked, it is just under 6,000 kilometres for WA.
Thanks, brilliant. Woohoo! It makes me so excited. I know that probably sounds weird to all of you out there, but I'm just so excited about this program, having driving these regional roads constantly and thinking about everyone and seeing the numbers, obviously daily and yearly. It's really difficult for us to stomach, for anyone to stomach, and that's really the injury prevention that you know, we just want to halt it. I do see some comments in the chat room. Ken, did you want me to answer those now, or are you going to wait till the end? I'm just not sure of the timing.
David Nash, what's your plan there?
Sorry, David.
You might want to just answer the question from Harris, which I think you were just talking about. How does this funding program apply for local governments who are keen to address high-risk roads on their networks? Is the state government responsible for coordinating this, or does the Office of Road Safety have a role to play? It seems most of the funding will end up going to state-controlled roads. So you're just talking about that, so it might be worth addressing that straight away.
Yeah, I think so. The legislation which this program is administered under, the National Land Transport Act, has agreements with states and territories. So there's not a direct contractual relationship with local government. So when we ask states to put forward their program, they can include local roads. And then it's up to them to gather the program that they want to see completed and delivered, and they put that us up to approve. If it's on a local road, we're happy to approve that if that's where the work should go. But our contract is with the state government. So we've seen a mix of projects come through. Would that be right, Mark?
Yeah, no, and we definitely are funding a number of local roads. The exact number off the top of my head, again, I'd have to really go and dig a lot more into the data to get that answer. But we definitely are funding local roads in the rural setting and also in the urban setting, particularly around some of the. And if I'll use New South Wales as a good example for that one, in the urban setting on local roads is around putting in protections around school zones for pedestrians and other vulnerable road users.
Thanks, Mark. There's a comment there from Max Cameron about if sections are not chosen by BCR analysis, how can the program guarantee value for money? I think it's really, you know, some of these are a high crash risk, but don't have that crash data to back it up. we're looking at the collective risk. We're not looking at black spots. There is a black spot fund. So this is about saying we know with this legacy road system, the risk is high. The crashes that happen are quite random, the fatal crashes. So what we want to do is overall reduce the risk and improve the service of the road, broadly. So that's why we're not putting a BCR on it, and otherwise some of these roads would never get funded, and yet you can see the huge lengths of kilometres being done with the availability of this funding. So we're really proud of that, and we really want to move, not just from 3 stars but higher than that, but obviously that's going to take time and there's a huge number of kilometres to go.
And just on the value for money, Gabby, I think there's the 2 factors in there in the value for money. Is the BCR, we've shown the value for money, but there's also, we do assess to make sure that the works themselves that are being proposed and the cost of those works are within a value for money estimate as well, and that there isn't, so from a more general procurement side of the works, is that the value for money in the works actually being undertaken is correct, or is there, I should say.
Yes, and then just probably the last thing I want to touch on is the 6-month time frame. I can see everybody diving in there saying how challenging it is, or it's too hard and all of that. We understand that. We understand that there is, it's difficult, but it is that sense of urgency that certainly made it a priority. It made it a huge priority for CEs of transport and road agencies. It meant that they really put a focus on this to get it to happen. And the other thing is that this was born out of stimulus. And we knew that there was a pent-up demand. So I think that we knew that we could spend the money, not so much spend the money, but we knew that the volume of work and the need and the gap was so great that this could be invested well, and by activating those local crews that no longer had work, it was an opportunity to keep people in jobs and sort of take advantage of the stimulus money being offered. That might be it from us, David.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you very much for that presentation, and we'll move on to Joseph Lee next. I'll just make him presenter. There we go.
Thanks, David.
So Joseph is the Senior Manager of Safer Roads for Transport for New South Wales, and his portfolio includes various road safety infrastructure programs, speed limits and speed management, data management and crash investigation, so the whole gamut. He's heavily involved in Austroads projects and is currently project managing various Austroads initiatives. So over to you, Joseph.
Thank you. So I'm just going to talk through a couple of Austroads, Ausrap related case studies as well. I wanted to flag that this presentation is quite similar in terms of its format to a presentation with Austroads a couple of days ago. And the reason for that is because from our point of view, this whole project and this whole space is sort of moving in a very similar direction. Austroads is going to take a lead in the coming months. It's still being formalized, but effectively to form the steerco across all the jurisdictions and industry as well about the future direction of Ausrap and star rating in general. I'm going to assume people have a bit of a working understanding of Ausrap, but essentially for today as well, just have it. So in New South Wales, what you can see here is the risk rating, the star rating outcomes of the New South Wales state-controlled road network. It's about 18,000 kilometres in length in total. Now in New South Wales, we actually have about 220,000 kilometres of roads. So you can see that obviously we haven't captured the local government road network here. And that's one of the future projects, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. Essentially, what I do want to flag here, though, is that from just purely looking at the map and purely looking at the table, there is too much black and red out there, which is essentially the worst categorization of star rating you can get. So from a star rating perspective, it's very similar to the rating of cars, except applies to infrastructure. And essentially your 1-star roads are very bad, and your 5-star roads are your much safer roads. How that's determined is essentially a review and coding of the infrastructure assets that's there on the road network, and some 70 attributes are assessed against the star rating requirements. So just to further add to what Mark and Gabby were presenting a little bit earlier, this is the network that we targeted through the funding program that they presented on, the federal stimulus program. And from that outcome, we were able to upgrade about 400 kilometers of road to systemically change from a 1-star to 3-star, but overall we targeted about 2,500 kilometers of road, additional 2,500 kilometers of road for upgrades in general as well. So just to reiterate that point, that program is really helping us sort of change the outcomes of this network and improve road safety going forward. In terms of a specific case study, this is the Princess Highway corridor that you can see there. And this is, for those of you that don't know, it connects the south of Sydney to Victoria. And this is the sort of seascape route, as opposed to the Hume Highway through the centre of New South Wales and Victoria. It's a very popular tourist route and is currently getting significant amount of funding from both the federal and the state governments as part of an upgrade. So this is currently a $1.4 billion program, but expect that to increase over time as the scope sort of gets expanded upon development. So why I bring this up is because the program team reached out to ourselves in the Centre for Road Safety very quickly about this and said, we want to make this road as safe as possible. That's a key driver for this upgrade program. And what we looked at is sort of what's happening now along the 480 kilometers of road and what we can achieve. And so you can see that on the map, and it goes again to the National Road Safety Strategy targets that was mentioned a little bit earlier, is that with the program that we worked with the program team on, you can see that 1 and 2-star roads are effectively removed, and that's the proposed after state. The program team is actually committed to actually remove the final 2 kilometers of 2-star roads that you see there. And why this is important is because it's a different application of the star rating process that we're going to see more and more of in major projects, especially in New South Wales, is that from a development and strategic point of view, the projects need to demonstrate that the road safety risk is significantly reduced. And one of the ways, and one of the most straightforward ways they can do that, is through this risk rating process using the star rating methodology. So we have a couple examples here. These are projects funded through our Safer Roads program, obviously a much smaller program in terms of dollars, but again, reiterating that route-based approach. So you've got the Sturt Highway here from essentially from Hume Highway near Wagga to Mildura, which is the Victorian border, and over 600 kilometers, we're again removing all 1-star roads and reducing the 2-star roads on the road network there. You can see some of the treatments that we're installing. We're installing wide centerline, roadside safety barrier, auto tactile line marking, clear zones, signage delineation, rural gateway treatments. So again, this is a mass action type project and another case study of how we've assessed the benefits of our program based on star rating. I understand there's a question about BCR previously, and this is one of the ways that we can justify the investment. So I'm just going to circle back to the Princess Highway for a moment. And one of the other applications of star rating that you're going to see more of as well is really around how we determine suitable cross sections. So that project that was mentioned a little bit earlier from Austroads. And what this allows our planners and designers to do is basically understand very quickly what sort of cross section they want to implement, so that we can scope, do your investigations, you can do your costings, estimates, etc., and even your public consultation based on an understanding of what the cross section is going to be. So to achieve the star ratings for the Princess Highway, especially the higher order star ratings, we're adopting this higher order cross section 2+2 on the busiest section of the road network of the Princess Highway. and that essentially goes from the south of Sydney down to Jervis Bay Road. And then the next section is from Jervis Bay Road to Batemans Bay, and that's got a higher order cross section as well. And then you can see as the demand drops in vehicle traffic a little bit further south, the cross section changes again. So from Batemans Bay to Eden, you'll see that it's a 2+1 configuration, and it's based on trying to achieve the maximum star rating possible. Now, this is obviously a planning and design stage project, and when we go into construction and development, etc., there are going to be modifications made. But one of the, I guess, system changes and cultural changes that this will bring is the fact that we get people to start thinking about the ideal safety cross-section from the start, as opposed to dealing, building cross-section, trying to retrofit the safety treatments after. Our past lessons have shown that that's not, that doesn't yield the greatest safety benefits. These are just some acknowledgements from the Princess Highway team that have worked with us on the program, from the program director and lead project developer. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. And I wanted to talk briefly about additional projects at the end. So right now, at the moment, we have 18,000 kilometers of road in New South Wales already assessed, and we're currently going through a process to assess a further 19,000 kilometers of regional road network. So that brings us up to about 37,000. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we actually have 220,000 kilometers of road. So the gap there is really around the local road network, and we fully acknowledge that. Now, we've looked at ways to code, to survey and code the local government road network using the current methodology. And essentially, we found that across local government, there's inconsistencies in how asset data is captured or whether it's transferable to the methodology. So what we're working on at the moment is a project we call AIRAP. It's an iMove project, so we're working with a lot of partners, including IRAP themselves, UTS's technology, and DD and TomTom. And essentially what we want to do is we want to leverage off market products that are out there. So many companies have existing LiDAR databases that are very rich in sort of data, and they drive all your GPS and similar sort of technologies. So we were wondering if we could take that data and have machine learning, so artificial intelligence applied over the top of that, and find a way that they could code this methodology for us. Now, the intent and remit that I've given to the project team is to ensure that it's, reliable, scalable, affordable, so that we can actually roll that out en masse. And what that allows us to do is actually target the missing 170,000 odd kilometers of road for local government that we're not able to feasibly do at the moment. So it's a proof of concept project. It all sounds great. It all sounds like it's going to work, but we're going to find out mid next year about how it's all going to go. That's one of the key projects that we're driving, and we're very excited about that. So I'm personally quite excited to see how that one finishes up next year. In closing, I do want to say that, as I mentioned earlier, Austroads is really taking a lead in this space, not just from a sort of technical perspective, but also from a strategic perspective and industry engagement perspective. A lot of what I've talked about today is sort of where initiatives New South Wales is implementing at the moment, and there are plenty of initiatives from other jurisdictions around the country as well, but it's an opportunity for us to start formalizing and bringing that all together so that we can keep the general public informed, we can advise our politicians, our state government jurisdictions and federal government, and also the general public and industry themselves. So what I'm expecting to see this space grow over the next couple of years, and looking forward to seeing that happen. I don't know if there are any questions.
Cool, thanks very much, Joseph. Look, we might move on to Ken Beer next, and then deal with questions after that. So thank you very much, Joseph. Ken Beer is our next speaker. Ken is the Principal Engineer at Safe System Solutions. Before founding his company in 2013, Ken held a variety of roles within the Victorian government. He's a senior road safety auditor and IRAP accredited to provide star ratings for existing roads and road designs. And we'd also like to thank Ken for organising the other speakers for today. So over to you, Ken.
Thanks, David, and thanks to everybody for joining in. As you can hear there, it's a pretty exciting time for star ratings across Australia. Federal government really invested, state government's getting on board. And what I thought I'd do, having a look at the list of participants or people logging into today, I see a lot of road safety auditors, people that I've audited with or done training with or the like, or just know as wonderful road safety auditors. I thought I'd show you some work that's happening currently associated with linking star ratings and road safety audits. And I'll talk you through some of the work that's happened, but I will jump very quickly into a demonstration of how you can do that. So I suppose the first question you want to ask is, why would we try to mash these two together? Well, they are both risk rating methodologies for roads to try to improve road safety. So there's a good start. And I've popped down here just a few dot points of some strengths of both road safety auditing and IRAP assessments. And I'm sure some of you would like to debate some of these, and that's all fine. But really, road safety audits, if you have a look at that, expert experience is really important to the audit process. It's a fairly easy process to get your head around and can be fairly low cost. It really opens up to any safety concerns that the auditors can conjure up and can go to quite a level of detail and considers all road users, their capabilities and limitations, and all stages of design, and can be done on existing conditions, sometimes termed different things in different countries, and obviously day and night. And many of you know the process extremely well. IRAP has some real strengths in terms of the global standard and the repeatability of the process and the way it's automated in that sense. It's quarantined out to vehicle occupants, motorcycles, pedestrians, and bicycles. And I should say here, for those who are not familiar with IRAP as such, it's the International Road Assessment Program. So it's really encompasses the methodology that OSRAP uses to get the star ratings. I'll get to that shortly. These are done in 100-metre segments, but can be done at a whole network, as you saw there, Joe putting up some slides of big networks that had been star rated. Objective metrics enabling targets and economic analysis. So we do have those specific metrics then that we can use and repeat and compare. Can be done on existing roads and designs, and the results can be held centrally on a web platform for IRAP and OSRAP, so that's a good thing. And there is a global training and accreditation associated with IRAP, which is a pretty exciting thing. So let's look at some of the limitations of the process very quickly before I jump into the example. Road safety audit, there's no global standard really. I mean, there are jurisdictions and Austrade has some guidance, but it's done slightly differently. There's a lot of variability depending on the expertise of the auditor and sometimes what they want to focus on. There's quite a bit of subjectivity often, and that can be advantageous in terms of expert opinion, but sometimes it presents challenges. Can be challenging to do long lengths in the audit process. Can be done, but can be very, very challenging sometimes. And this one, the tend towards low cost but low impact treatments. Now that's it is a generalization there, but there are a lot of audits you see out there that tweak around with signs and lines, and that's pretty much the majority of the audit, where there are some pretty fundamental risks on that road that aren't being reported on. Now, you might say, well, that's an inadequacy of the auditor or the training or the registration or whatever it is. We do see a fair bit of that out there, though, unfortunately. And there's no financial or quantified impacts of recommendations if you're in a jurisdiction that does recommendations, which is everybody except for New South Wales, where you make recommendations. And then if we look at IRAP, there's a fixed list of attributes. So that's a bit of a limitation. I mean, there's a lot of attributes, 60 something, I think, that are inputted in to get the risk rating. The segment lengths of that 100-metre segment that gets a score. Usually performed, well, it's only performed in daylight, and particular weather conditions. The results depend on the quality of the data input, and I'll get back to that. But there's pretty good quality stuff available out there. Results can be misinterpreted. Data requirements for a full assessment, and within that, I think sometimes people get a bit scared about the costs as well, and they sometimes think, well, star rating and risk rating like this is only for the national network or the state network. But we can challenge some of that thinking, and by combining these two, we can sort of eliminate a lot of those limitations and add to the strengths. So, like anything, I think probably the best way to do this is through an example and just going straight into it. But the way this came about was the Asian Development Bank engaged IRAP, the organisation, and Safe System Solutions together to come up with a process, and it's termed Star Ratings for Road Safety Audit, and got input from world experts in road safety auditing and the IRAP methodology, and people like Matt Chamberlain and Phil Jordan, Craig McMillan, who else? Daniel Lasada, Mike Dresners, and lots of others out there provided input into the methodology and how it would go about. So it's quite exciting. But let me just jump into an example. So you'll see visually how this could play out. Now I'm going to do the most simple type of star rating for road safety audit, all right? It's what we call a level 1. And I'm going to do it with this sort of hypothetical example here. So a road design is prepared, and it's got a flexible barrier system or a semi-rigid barrier system transitioning into a rigid bridge barrier system. This is part of the design. And so just like a normal road safety audit, the team would review the designs, looking at the designs. They get out and they look at the site, daytime, nighttime. They're gathering some data, and often road safety auditors do gather bits and pieces of data and information, but they're going to need to gather some specific data and information now in terms of speed limit, 85th percentile speed if available or could be predicted, traffic volume, pedestrian cyclist volume, and a few other things. Okay, so this barrier is transitioning straight to that the more rigid barrier. So we're going to, and many of you auditors are already no doubt seeing this, that we're going to have a potential pocketing scenario where the deflection of the one barrier system, it'll deflect a bit, and we'll see some sort of potential pocketing into the more rigid barrier. And that can play out in the scenarios that you can see the aftermaths here, where the vehicle has obviously gone out there and there's been an incident there. So like a normal road safety audit, the auditors have seen this in the design, they risk rate this, so they use the risk matrix that's available in Austrade's Guide Part 6A or whichever your jurisdictional one is, and they think about, well, what's the frequency of this possible crash at this specific location? What's the severity it will likely result in? And maybe for this one, they say, well, it's improbable for that one, but it's going to be serious, so let's go medium. We can debate that a little bit, but let's just keep moving on. So then a road safety auditor will write this up. And I'm not going to go through the details, but writing up the explanation of the risk and some factors in there, a little snip of the design is always a good thing. Risk rating it. Some jurisdictions or some auditors like to put a safe system energy component there, talking about the crash they're thinking of, and is it above sort of what the body can withstand in terms of biomechanical tolerances. The next little bit is the new stuff. So that's sort of run of the mill. There is then an initial star rating done of that particular section of that. Now, how do you do that? Well, some of you know how to do it, but it's actually quite easy. And people get scared by this a little bit. But it is free, and it's through the IRAP website utilizing VITA. Absolutely free to access this. So you just got to register, and it's really a wonderful tool that we want people to be getting involved in. So you register for that. I've put the website there. You can find it just by Googling IRAP as well. And what you do is you jump into that, and it'll take you into something that looks like this, and you'll have some tools available to you. Now, the easiest, simplest one to use is the demonstrator tool, this one here. The demonstrator tool is going to be your easy, quick way to grab a star rating for a particular section. And IRAP has some wonderful videos freely available on how to use the demonstrator. And you know, so you can do all this free and just quickly get an idea. So then once you go into the star rating demonstrator, you can see there you've got the vehicles, you've got the motorcycles, pedestrians and cyclists, and star ratings are already sort of there depending on which standard cross-section might be selected. But you can see here you've got roadsides, mid-block, intersections, flow, traffic flow, vulnerable road user facilities and land use, and some speeds. And under each of these, if I click on roadsides, for example, you've got different things in here that you're plugging in some information. So you do have to plug a little bit of information in there, and it can take, you know, 2, 3 minutes, 5 minutes for you to get it all together. But it's going to develop a star rating for you. So you might be thinking about the offset to hazards, and you can, you know, choose how far off the hazard is that you're thinking about. What is that hazard on the driver's side? Well, again, you click on that and you get a whole series of things. Is it a barrier system? Is it, and what type of barrier system is it? Is it a drainage ditch, a cliff, a tree? So here we'd go unprotected safety barrier end, because we're worried about that pocketing, that unprotected end there. Now, there is a bit to learn about exactly which each of these are. There's wonderful coding manuals available, and as I said, some wonderful webinars from IRAP available, or some very good training courses they offer, which you can go to. So, you know, that might be unprotected. Then you still have some stuff on your mid-block there, and it produces then a star rating for that section. Okay, and it's a bit of just an indication there of what's the star rating for these different road users. And so for this one example, we're seeing it's a 2-star for passenger vehicles, also motorcyclists. There were some pedestrians in the area, so it's a 1-star for them, and 2 stars for cyclists due to a bit of, you know, big factor being the shoulders there. They've got a bit of safety out of that. You can see also there's some numbers under the star rating. So it's not just about a star, but it's also a risk rating there. And that becomes really important as well, because a 2-star at one end and a 2-star at the other end is actually quite a significant difference in risk. But we'll get back to that. So then you go to your audit and you just put those in there. So immediately, anybody with this report can see what the star rating is of that design at that point from your indication star rating. And it's just an indication. Then, of course, you go to a recommendation. So how can this be improved? And many of you will know you want to transition that barrier system to the more rigid system, and maybe tighten up post spacings, have an approved transition, and Austroads has just released some more of those. But that recommendation is made as it would be in a normal road safety audit, and a nice little picture there to show whoever's reading it what we're thinking about. But then that is also star rated. Okay, so this then will, you go back into Vita, the little bit of software, you change that hazardous end to a barrier system, and you then produce a star rating for that. And you can see there, these are the differences just from that change, that we see that the passenger vehicle has improved up to a 3-star now. It's actually had quite a significant improvement there if you look at the numbers. The motorcyclists have had an improvement there. They stay within the 2 stars, but it's important to note that there has been some improvement associated with that. And this is all going on in the background in the IRAP methodology and calculating this. Pedestrians have not changed and cyclists have not changed. Okay, so that alteration is not going to influence that. And so then that's put into that road safety audit report. So that then becomes your finding. Now this is really exciting, I think, for a number of reasons. Well, first of all, it's a pretty good way to communicate, to tell a story, exactly as Gabby said, telling a story using these stars. So you can see something there. It's always a great way to, like for an issue like this, to say, well, if we fix this, we get a great improvement, or we get improvement here and a bit of improvement here. But it's a little reminder, you know, that there's still some issues going on for some other road users, and there's still, you know, some issues here that might need to be considered. Now that'll be a holistic thinking of the project and everything like that. But often, you know, the audit has picked a few issues like this. They are rectified, but we're still left with this road with a lot of inherent risk in it. So that's what we call the level 1, the simplest one. And I really think that we can just be doing that as road safety auditors with not much training, you know, a little bit of training to understand how to use the demonstrator tool, and it's giving a nice snapshot. And I, in audit teams, have been using that not just within the recommendations, but also to communicate to the client scenarios that would give much better outcomes. I was doing one with a colleague on a local government high-speed road, and you know, recommendations were made, but sort of showing that even if you get all the signs and lines right on this road, it's still 1 star. Okay, because they, you know, they're expecting audit reports with, you know, signs and line improvements and the like. And of course, then you're putting in other things to show them what it would be required to get to a 5-star or 4-star road. Yes, some are way out of their budget in terms of barrier systems and the like, but the speed and altering the speed becomes really clear to them that that's a great way to get really big increases in star rating without the big expense from an infrastructure perspective. So that's a level 1. A level 2 is a little more complicated, a little more to it, and it goes through star rating the entire design and the entire route as a baseline, and then star rating it all again at the end. You still go through that star rating of different specific issues as you go through it. And I'll show you very quickly some of the advantages of this. There's a little more, there's more effort to this. You might be, as an auditor, given a risk rating report, a star rating report, might look something like that, a risk worm. You can utilize that to identify immediately some areas you might be interested in looking at in more detail as an auditor, but not to say that you don't want to look at other areas as well, but it can help you out a little bit that way. You can also get lots of good information out of the IRAP system, the Vita system, on particular types of crashes that are contributing to risk, and utilize that to identify areas. Again, you might be very interested as an auditor to find out what's going on in some of these areas. So it's helping you with a bit of filtering already. I do always warn, though, you don't want to be just fully driven by that. As an auditor, we're looking for things that might sit outside of the risk rating methodology. That's actually a thing we call situational scrutiny in the manual, which is about how the auditors, utilizing their experience and the like, can add a heap of value to the IRAP coding as well. But I'll get to that if we have time. And the level three is, I suppose, the comprehensive one, the highest level of star rating for road safety audit assessment. And with this one, you're still doing that sort of audit process and getting star ratings for the design and each issue, but you also can get fatality estimations. And again, that can come out of the beta system or the star rating system, the OSRAP system. And it can also produce investment plans as well, which is indications of what could be implemented or what the system is generating as ideas for you to implement to get better star ratings, recommendations and fatality estimation. But you can see there, you can get a before and after of what is expected in terms of savings of death and serious injury, which is quite exciting. So the investment plans come up with lots of different ideas, and they can be taken on. As an auditor, you can use some of those in your thinking about recommendations and looking at areas of risk. And it comes with, you know, GIS maps and the like. And again, you can then utilize outputs for, you know, showing existing road with a red being a 2-star, black being 1-star. So showing the percentage improvement in the design and then the final star rating after going through this process. And I talked there a little bit about the ability out of the system to be able to predict reductions in death and serious injury. And again, this is a pretty wonderful communication tool to really everybody to be able to see how many lives are being saved by alterations to the infrastructure. Now, I've got a few more minutes. I popped the contact details in there because I was wondering how far I'd get in this process. And I can see a bit of question interaction going on there, but there are a couple more slides I do want to show before answering some questions, but I can talk to people. The situational scrutiny that I mentioned before is a really exciting and important way that the road safety auditors can assist in the coding and to get better star ratings out of the road. And I've got a few examples. I'll move through them pretty quickly, but we've got here some sort of pedestrian overpass over some hypothetical road here. Now, when you go into star rate, so you've got to put a choice in. You've got this proposed overpass structure, pedestrian overpass structure, and you sort of scratch your head at that, and you go, well, yeah, that's in there. Now, for pedestrians, the IRAP methodology is really going to say that all the pedestrians are going to use that, and it gives you 5 stars immediately for pedestrians. But the thing is that we need to understand, well, are all the pedestrians going to use it? And this is where road safety auditors are really fantastic additions to this process, where they can see the pedestrian desire lines or reasons why they would or wouldn't be going up there, or cultural reasons or the like. And so this is an example of probably, you know, a little bit of a limitation at this stage in the star rating methodology. I mean, in theory, it's all good, but it could be coded either way. So that's one example where the auditors are injecting wonderful information into the accuracy of that star rating. Another one would be barrier end terminals. We were talking a bit about barriers on that last one. And, you know, the amount of end terminals out there is just huge around the world, and even seeing them as you're driving around the network or walking around the network here in Australia. And so which one do you code into which category? And you can really code barriers into many different categories, and if end terminals are appropriate, they'll be categorized into one category, and if they're not, they get into another category. Again, somebody with expert knowledge around this, a road safety auditor, can be adding that value to get the correct coding and appropriate star ratings out of that. Just one or two more here. Another exciting situational scrutiny one, or that I think is another exciting one, is the use of pedestrian fencing. Now, pedestrian fencing, when you're coding in IRAP, really, you're either going to have pedestrian fencing as present, and that's going to give really big benefits for pedestrian safety, or it's not there, and it has, it's probably baseline or the like. So that's factored in. But they're the only two choices. A road safety auditor, as many as you would know, can identify that a pedestrian fence can trap pedestrians onto the road. So they could be trying to cross in a particular desire line, and they walk a little bit along the road because there's a pedestrian fence there, and in they go. So the design of something like that could actually increase risk. Now that's not able to be coded specifically in the star ratings at the moment, but that's something that an auditor could be picking up. And there's a few more like this where we see things like line marking that may be misleading. So misleading line marking, increasing a specific risk like that. Again, not something that can particularly be coded to get that star rating change. It's either just poor or adequate in your coding options within IRAP or within OSRAP. And so like this one, you see a right turn arrow from a lane that doesn't actually have the ability to turn or to go off the motorway here. So we're going to have a pretty nasty scenario going on up there. IRAP would just simply code that as either probably poor line marking, although in IRAP it's a bit more around the legibility or the ability to see it, how clear it is, and the like. But still, you'd probably like that poor. But it's hardly going to alter the star rating at all with that change. But we know as auditors that's a big issue that needs to be rated accordingly. And also things like new roads and speed limits and operating speed. I mean, you don't have the ability to check data on that, so you've got to make predictions. And if it's, you really don't think people will be following that speed, that can be coded in accordingly. Yeah, just an example of the way that this can be used very quickly, very easily, very cheaply by road safety auditors. I showed you the tables, but it could be also in some general commentary around scenarios that would change risk profiles. As I mentioned, this was for a local government road, high speed, and just sort of showing scenarios that would be needed to get star ratings up. And it's pretty exciting that can be done very easily and cheaply, and be something that we can really be providing that advice. I might stop there. I've got more slides, but I think that there's a few questions, and it'd be good to get a bit of discussion going on. I will briefly talk to this. Yes, we've got lots of tools: safe system assessments, black spot investigations, network planning, audits, star rating, and they feed in at different points, and it's about taking on which one is appropriate for which time. And it's not to say that abandon all safe system assessments or abandon all road safety audits and only go to this. They're all they all play their role at different times. Okay, David, I'll hand back to you. I can't quite work out how to. Oh, there we go.
Good, thank you very much, Ken. Thank you for your presentation. There's quite a discussion happening there about why we got a 1-star rating for pedestrians when the treatment was about barriers on the bridge, and there's probably very few pedestrians there. So if you'd like to read through those little comments, because it's a whole conversation happening there, and we might come back to that question. And in the meantime, can I throw to Mark or Gabby to maybe comment on the very first issue in our chat from Brad Spalding about wide centre-line treatments and barrier treatments, which will probably take more than 6 months to develop and deliver. So the 6 months sort of issue sort of comes up again. Would you like to comment on that some more?
Yeah, thanks. Happy to. It's Gabby here. I understand that 6 months is a very short time frame, and what we're finding is that states are investing in planning and design upfront. So, because the purpose of this program was to have shovel-ready projects, if I can use that terminology. So we're finding a greater investment in planning and design that states are taking on board, so that they do have plans ready, so that they have a number of projects scoped out and ready to go. And I think this has also meant that chief executives and agency heads are now seeing road safety as a priority and a need to have an understanding of that network and the gaps and what they would need to do and how long it would take and to scope things out. So that's being addressed within agencies. But the program is really designed for shovel-ready projects based on the fact that it was a stimulus program.
Cool. There's also a comment there from Adam Mularczyk about local government issues, but at the end of his comment, he talks about local government often not having the necessary skills and experience in this area. Would any of you like to comment on skills and experience?
I think we've recognised that we need to provide greater support to local government. So some local governments, some council areas are fantastic. But the further you get out from the big urban and metropolitan councils, it is harder sometimes to attract the expertise that you need. And often when they are bringing in consultants, they might come and do a piece of work and then they leave. So there's a need definitely to grow capability and capacity across local government. And I'm hoping that we can help build that. And that is also sort of one of the findings of the inquiry that was delivered in 2018, the inquiry into the previous road safety strategy about that need. So it's a recognised need. And I think there's some of the training and the tools, when Ken was just talking about, there's a whole lot of stuff out there. We need to find what's fit for purpose. And so I know that we're funding the WA Local Government Association to undertake a project to find out what's going to be right for their local governments in order to be able to undertake assessments, in order to find out what's the right training. That's something that Austroads is also working on in the background.
Yeah, can I just add? Sorry, it's Mark here. I just wanted to add in. I think that also goes back to as well the way that we allow lots of project bids to be put in, and using whichever methodology is sort of fit for the purpose of the or fit for the organisation submitting it. So that's why things like I think that Austroad guides to network safety plans does provide, and I think we use the term quick and dirty, does provide like a quick and dirty assessment of a road network, which while some there is a requirement for some training in there, it's not, you don't need massive resources to go through and have a look at a road and come up with what could be a star rating for that under that network guide. And then from that, what works you could do on that road to actually lift that star rating as well.
I just want to add, I mean, I think tools like the demonstrator tool that I briefly showed you there are actually a wonderful education tool for people new to road safety engineering. I mean, it's amazing how quickly people understand the importance of speed and speed management when they play around with speed limits and operating speed in the Vita tool, and they just drop it down and they see the star rating go up, and they put it up and they see the star rating go down. I mean, that little action of them going through that process, you know, is so valuable in terms of understanding some of the fundamentals and the importance of speed within road safety. And you can do the same with, you know, barriers and separation and vulnerable road user facilities. So I think we can utilize some of the existing tools in our training but also it helps that it's not opinion based it's not opinion based for people new to auditing or new to developing a road safety project. There are metrics produced using wonderful research done by IRAP and others out there with wonderful research organizations from around the world, that we can be confident there's some rigor behind these. So somebody who is very new to the whole idea, utilizing that, we can get some assurance that what they're proposing as ideas or alterations has got some research and evidence behind it, utilizing that tool. So I think it's pretty exciting. And I work with a lot of very green road safety auditors, as I'm sure a lot of you do. And so pointing them at something like this so that their thoughts on the risk of an issue or how it will improve things has some evidence and some research behind it's a pretty exciting prospect. Now, David, do you want me to talk a little bit about the discussion around the pedestrians and cyclists associated with a barrier issue that was identified? Yeah, so
go for it.
Yeah, so it's a good one. And Rob McInerney, and hello, Rob, CEO of IRAP, has made some good comments in there. As soon as there is a presence of a road user, it gets a star rating in the methodology. In the IRAP methodology. So even if it's a small number of pedestrians in the hypothetical scenario, yes, it was between 1 and 5 pedestrians an hour, maybe walking along the roadside between villages or getting off a bus or the like. And we see that sort of stuff happening on the Australian road network. So by the pure presence of some pedestrians there or cyclists there, it's going to trigger a star rating. Right? Now, the issue that the auditor has picked up there has got nothing to do with pedestrians, right? But it's still that we get that pedestrian star rating. And as I mentioned there, we're not going to improve it with changing the barrier. We're going to improve stuff for the vehicle. And it's going to sit there. But it is one way to remind people, hey, you've got a vulnerable road user here that is at risk. Now, it may come later, but if the audit report has no recommendations for anything associated with pedestrians, that pedestrian risk is going to stay there at 1 star. And so from a communication and a holistic thinking about all road users perspective, it's actually pretty exciting. Yeah, that particular issue doesn't change it, and that doesn't mean it's wrong or right. It just means that, okay, we've addressed that issue. Now, what's the next issue? Let's have a think about these pedestrians now. What is the risk, and how do we go about that? Now, interestingly, you would have seen in the road safety audit process, when you integrate star rating, you still do a risk rating as a road safety auditor. So you may rate a risk low or the like, and the star rating might tell a slightly different story, but that will be because of your assessment of the situation, your situational scrutiny as an auditor. So it kind of combines the best of both.
Cool, thank you for that, Ken. There's another question in the chat from Chris Urovitz about star ratings and the safe system alignment. So is there a consensus on connecting star rating to the degree of safe system alignment? In other words, how would the Office of Road Safety and jurisdictions know that their actions now are converging on the 2050 or 2056 goal of 0 deaths? Who'd like to take that one on? Maybe is that a one for Gabby and Mark?
I'm happy to have a go. It's a rather complex question, and everything we're doing is towards Vision Zero, and I think if we can get roads to 3 stars, that's a great achievement, but it shows there's a huge gap to go towards that safe system alignment. So what I probably want everyone to know is that we recognise how far we've got to go, but everything we're doing is to get to Vision Zero by 2050, so that's no fatal or serious injuries by 2050, and our targets are getting pitched that way so that each year we can build on and leverage what we've done to get greater gains. But I think where we are now is we still need to develop a lot of baselines in order to be able to understand that the best we can. I don't think we have enough of the network assessed yet to give us a baseline for the whole network. I think it's really patchy across the country, and you can see the benefit. I mean, Joseph, put it very plainly about what they've been able to achieve with the work that they've had done and how that informs where we need to go. But obviously there's a huge network out there which is yet to be rated. So I don't know if that answers the question, but we are where we are with a desire to go much further. I don't know if you want to add to that, anyone?
Yeah, just to add to that as well, Chris, just about your question. Good to see you, mate. Look, in short as well, I oversimplified in many ways the input we had on the Princess Highway Upgrade Program. We are heavily involved in the safety assessment of that program, requirements. We're heavily involved in the planning space in terms of making sure that where we're not doing bypasses, what it looks like we're going for rural towns, etc. So I think in of itself, no, it won't help us get to the 2050 targets alone, but what they do provide is a very good way to identify where to prioritize our efforts and then how to assess down the track whether how well we went against them. So yeah, it's a little bit more complex in terms of how you use those tools to get to those targets, but they're definitely a key one in our arsenal.
Yeah. A lot of jurisdictions are sort of setting Vision Zero end states and mapping Vision Zero end states for their network. And if you look at those Vision Zero end states and OSRAP assess those or IRAP assess those, you see that they come out as 5 stars. And there's pretty good alignment with Vision Zero end states that we're trying to sort of build. So, road stereotypes and the like that have that virtual elimination of death and serious injury, and star rating them seems to align pretty well with 5 stars. There's little tweaks, and Johan Strandroth, for those who know, Johan has done some work in sort of looking at those differences at that very 5-star high end and vision stereotypes and the like. But in general, wonderfully aligned processes. 5-star roads, 5-star vehicles, good enforcement. I saw Max Cameron making some good comments around enforcement and other features, and we're going to see pretty much ourselves at that Vision Zero in 2050, 2056, depending on which jurisdiction you're at.
Joseph, would you like to just mention the Austroads projects you're working on? You've got some information there in the chat, but maybe just a couple of sentences about that.
Sure. So New South Wales is looking at the 3 Austroads projects this year, but 2 relevant to this conversation. So one is the review of the Guide to Safe Roads Part 2, and essentially what the intent of that project is to provide a guide that's an introduction to road safety engineering. So that covers a lot of what we talked about today, and really it's very early stages, but the sort of end intent of that as well is to not just provide a guide, but then that could be the basis of a training package further on that can be delivered to people working in road safety engineering. So whether that's council or the sort of state jurisdictions, but a key input to that is obviously to support those local government areas, especially where accessibility to this sort of knowledge is a bit more harder to get to. The second project really complements that one, is a sort of review of online toolkits that Austroads provides. Excuse me, and essentially reviewing what the requirements are out there, what are the drivers and needs, and then basically really looking at making those tools available again. So that one's probably going to take a little bit of more time just from an IT perspective, but the intent is to make all this knowledge and tools, etc., more accessible to local government and industry.
Cool, thank you very much. Well, look, it's right on 6 o'clock, so I'll bring things to a formal close. And firstly, I'd like to thank our 4 very good speakers, Gabby, Mark, Joseph and Ken, for all of their input. There's quite a lot of information there in the chat if you'd like to follow that more carefully. From the ITE ANZ point of view, I think this is the last webinar that we'll have for this year, but we hope to have many more next year. Look out for our annual breakfast meeting, which will be sometime in February next year, which is one of our main events. And some recent news is that ITE webinars from North America are now free of charge. The webinars that we hold here in Australia and New Zealand are free of charge anyway, but we've always had to pay for attendance to the North American ones. But now you don't if you are a member of ITE. So that's another incentive for people to actually join up and become a member of the ITE and keep abreast of what's happening around the rest of the world, but particularly in America and Canada, as that's where the great majority of members are. So thank you very much for attending. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time. I'll sort of bring it to a close and stop the recording, but if people would like to stay on, then